So this week we've been talking foolish. Been focusing on
Us never. Folly.
Fools of the fall.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
Y'all gonna hurt yourselves.
Follies in there.
All right. So the Bible has a lot to say about
It really does.
fools, like Proverbs specifically, but like it was just, there's overwhelming. So I stole someone else's verse that they recommended. So 2 Timothy 2:23 says, "But foolish and unlearned questions void, knowing that they do gender strifes." So have you ever heard the saying that there are no stupid questions?
Mm-hmm.
That is a stupid saying.
Yeah, so I would have to argue that. Like, I've heard some stupid questions.
Teach a life
about
force
that.
classroom. We should probably not say that out loud.
Yeah, I think that there are stupid questions.
Most of the time from adults, though, not at life force.
Yes. But I think to determine whether a question is stupid or not, you have to know the intent of a heart.
Yeah,
Like,
true.
even the kids sometimes, they'll come to me and they'll ask a question, and I'm like, are you really asking me that?
Mhm.
But like, they're so sincere and like genuine that
Right.
they want to know. I'm like, okay, to you, it's really not a stupid question because
Right.
you want to know. And so that's kind of what we're going to be looking at today. So what makes a question foolish is our first question to kick it off.
The intent of the question, I believe. So teaching 18 years now. If the question, like students I'm speaking of, sometimes ask questions and you can tell the intent of the question. That the intent of the question is they're trying to trick you into saying something that you don't want to
Mhm.
say, or there's like some like punchline involved in either the question or the answer, and there's like they're not really asking for knowledge, they're asking for the foolishness
Yeah.
of it.
I would say almost the opposite. The intent of the answer
Yeah.
instead of the intent of the question. I think it's in the same chapter. Paul's like, avoid genealogies
Mhm.
and
Yep.
something about jingle jinglings.
I don't think my Bible said that.
Jingle
but-
jinglings. Maybe
You're
I'm,
reading the Santa
I'm thinking of a
Claus
singing.
version?
I'm thinking of a singing snowman. Now that I think about it, I always get that mixed up with my Bible. But
That's good. 9 out of 9.
That's right. That's right. He says something along the lines of avoid like things that just don't matter.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like the reason I'm asking this really it holds no water. Like there's no weight there. Avoid those things because they're not beneficial.
Right.
And so that would be my answer. What makes something foolish is like if you're not actually trying to learn, trying to grow, trying to understand, trying to further
Mhm.
with that answer, then it's foolish.
Yeah,
I
but-
think that I've come to a point of like when I first started teaching LifeWise, as you know, Josh, I was like, any question,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. But now it's just like, all right. So I'm particularly teaching like Newer Testament stuff. It's like if it has nothing to do with your salvation, it's a foolish question
Right.
because we're talking about your salvation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So let's keep the questions.
Well, one of the things that I
directed
say a
to
lot of
that.
times, I don't even know where I started. I've been saying this for years. It's actually usually I say this in criticism, but it's like your house is burning down and you wake up in the middle of the night, your house is engulfed in flames and you're like, oh no, we have to save the flower bed. Like, okay, is that a thing? Yes. Do you have beautiful flowers? Yes. But like your family's in the house, your possessions are in the house, your money's in the house. Like, let's get our priorities in order. And that's kind of the thing with the gospel. Like
Mhm.
gospel's got to be way up there as the top
Versus-
priority.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are lots of other things we could debate or discuss, but they're way down here. And so that's kind of the same thing with questions. Like there are flower bed foolish questions, and then there are gospel questions that are like life or death
Yes.
for real.
Yeah, so foolish questions would be when you're directing the attention to yourself instead of truth, or if it's cynical and like there's no goal
Yeah.
or resolution, like you're just kind of being mischievous in asking your question.
Ironically, that's you said the book of Proverbs. So like I feel like that's the whole point of Ecclesiastes, the cynicism.
Yeah.
Like Solomon's like,
Yeah.
there's no point.
Yeah.
It's all vanity. It's all foolishness. Like there's no hope here. And ironically, that same man wrote Proverbs about foolishness.
So how do we avoid asking foolish questions?
Well, I would say think. before you speak.
Well, I think of
like think through the question, but also think behind the intent of the question and answer.
Right. Like, have you ever like you don't want to directly ask someone about a certain situation, so like you like take the long way and you're asking, like you're trying to ask them questions to get them going or get things going. You know what I mean? Like, you know the intent whether you come out with it or not.
I think that, so like Josh said, think before you ask the question, because I find that like our brains work in a very weird way. Like when someone's talking to us and then the first thing that we think, like, I need to question that, and we just like check a bookmark in our head, like, okay, I'm going to question that, and then they keep talking, and then at the end, do you have any questions? Well, yes, and we ask the question, and everybody's looking at us like they literally just answered that question. It's because you're not attentive to, you know what I mean? And this recently happened to me, so I read different versions of the Bible as I study through it, you know what I mean? So we're studying 2 Samuel, and when David's son who tries to take over, so it says like he like made this the Valley of the Kings and all that, and he had no sons, and I was like, clearly this man had sons, and like right away I was like, I'm gonna have to like research this when I get done my studying. And then like a couple of verses later, it explains about his sons, and I was like, it explains itself. Like so just being attentive.
But also like that's a perfect example. And I know you and I have had this conversation the last 3 years, maybe a few thousand times. But there's something to be said for not being willing to answer a question always. So I think of, remember when Jesus, he's already died, he died, he rose again, and then he comes to the seashore. And remember when Peter's like, yeah, but what about John? Is John going to die? And Jesus is like, that's a stupid question. That's a paraphrase. Jesus didn't say that. But Jesus says, what does it matter to you how he dies? In other words, Jesus didn't answer Peter's question because Jesus knew it's okay sometimes not to answer questions, right? Mm-hmm. And what we've talked about so often over the years is that sometimes the best thing for the asker is to let them learn their own answer, because in that process, they're growing their faith. They're researching it out. They're learning for themselves. They're growing in their ability to understand more. When we just, what's the answer to this question, and then answer them immediately, they're not actually growing. They're getting a box checked.
Well, like if I'm teaching my kids math and they're like, Mom, what is the answer? And if I just write in a 4 for the answer, like they didn't learn how to do that at all. Like I just gave them the answer. So there is growth in having to find those answers yourself.
But I think that churches are really bad for, especially in Sunday school, like we treat it like it's math class or history class or English class. Like it's all Bible trivia. It's factual things of what is this? This is the answer. That doesn't actually help anyone with faith. And I think that's the reason we've talked about this week after week. I think that's the reason the Pharisees had so much biblical knowledge, but they really didn't know Jesus. It's because they had no ability to grow in their own personal faith. They grew in facts about faith.
And that's what made them miss Jesus.
Exactly. And so may we be cautious for the next generation. Like sometimes the best thing you can do for your kid in Sunday school, sometimes the best thing you can do at camp for your kids as a counselor is to not answer their questions. Tell them like Jesus, that's a stupid question. No, don't tell them that. tell them that, look into it for yourself. Come back to me. I'd be happy to talk about that after you look into it or read it or study or pray about it, Yeah.
So kind of like what Kevin said, I had pause and pray. So like think about, what you're asking. And I seen this one, I thought it said to check your fruit. Will this question cause peace and growth? Or is it like, are you trying to get, like, do you have a motive behind this? Is it a good motive or a bad motive? And asking a question, like if you, I was just talking to Kason last night, like we can ask questions but we need to be teachable. Like, is your question just like condescending? He's the chore checker. Like, Callan, why didn't you make your bed? Like, he doesn't really want to know why Callan didn't make his bed. He just wants him to know that he didn't make his bed. And so like we need to have a teachable heart and have like a good motive behind why we're asking these questions.
So, we were just talking about Jesus and John and Peter, and ultimately like without, I was relating that into the fact that Peter would find out. Mm-hmm. What you're talking about, check your fruit to see if this causes peace or growth. I was just listening to a message. My tongue is trying to catch up with me. Just listened to a message this week about the book of Job. Do you know Job asks all these questions? The whole like first 30 some chapters are Job asking questions. God finally shows up. We're waiting on God this whole time. God finally shows up, and God doesn't answer a single question. And sometimes the best answer is no answer at all. And sometimes your faith grows the most when you don't get answers to your questions. And sometimes you're talking about the fruit and the peace and the growth. Like sometimes genuine Christianity is proven by being okay with never getting an answer. There's a Jeremy Camp song that I love that I can't think of it all right now, but I do love it. But it says that like sometimes you just have to be okay with never getting an answer.
If you're growing fruit and you see the start of an apple and you cut it off really quick, it's gonna die.
Yeah,
but if you leave it alone and don't touch it, that's when the fruit really starts.
Well, and the point this preacher was making, which I totally agree with, is, and again we've said this 1,000 times, but I want a God who's way beyond my comprehension. Mm-hmm. And in order for him to be such a large, vast God, there just have to be some things that I'll never understand.
Yeah.
And he'll never give me an answer to because he's God and I'm not. And that's kind of God's point in the book of Job. God literally comes, he doesn't answer a single question. He gives some questions of his own. He says, Job, where were you when I hung the stars? Job, where were you when I made the ostrich? Job, where were you? Like, that's what God comes back with. He comes back with more questions. And Job's just like, yes, you God, me not. Like that's he shrinks him to his right size. And I think that's what a lot of Christians need. I think that's what a lot of preachers need. I think that's a lot of what I need is just being shrunk to our own size, knowing he's God, we're not. He doesn't owe us questions or explanations.
So this morning in Sunday school, one of my students is just always full of questions on questions on questions. And so it came like part of the lesson was like witnessing. Okay. And like I was pretty sure none of them knew what that meant. Right, so I just started off with the basically like, what is witnessing in the Bible, and they're just like, I don't know, right? So I'm like, okay, so what is a witness? So I like, break it down. Like, witness is someone who actually sees something and reports what they saw. So witnessing in the Bible is telling other people about God that you have experienced in your life. Okay. So one of the students was like, well, witnessing is proving to someone that the Big Bang Theory is wrong. And I'm like, no, that's not witnessing. Like, you're just arguing with them. And their response was, no, I'm not arguing. I'm just trying to prove to them where I'm right and they're wrong. And me and Tom were like, thank you. That's the very definition of like, did you read that in the Webster's? Like, where did you get that? Such a great. So, we have to be careful, you know what I mean, that when we answer or ask a question, is this something that's going to lead into like, because we're not supposed to argue over these things, you know what I mean? Like yesterday, spending 4 hours in the van with you guys' dad, you know what I mean? I had a lot of questions I wanted to ask him. So it was never like an argument. It's like, so what do you think about this? Oh, okay. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think that's exactly Paul's point in this text. He ends it with knowing that they do not gender strife. So we would never say it that way. But his point is this: the reason you don't deal with the foolish things is because it ends up in strife. And like, again, so many pastors, so many teachers, so many people are so busy trying to debate, trying to prove a point, shove it down their throat, that it just causes more division. And and ironically, the Bible, they're big, like Paul specifically, his biggest soapbox is division at no cost. Like, do not ever divide no matter what, ever. And so by bringing up foolishness, we're causing the very thing that we're supposed to avoid at all costs. And I don't know. I think that sometimes we don't recognize the consequence of talking about things that really don't matter.
Yeah.
So it kind of segues into the last question. So when someone asks a foolish question with the intention to gender or breed strife, so they're trying to cause the strife, how should we respond? So it says that we should be avoiding it, but when people come and that's their intent, like what are we supposed to do?
You got an answer to that one?
Shut them down.
Shut them down.
Shut them down.
9 out of 9.
So, but it's difficult, particularly when you're teaching, 20 kids at the same time. So you really know in your head a lot of times before they even ask the question. Like, this kid typically asks a solid question, but this kid over here with his hand up, he's going to be foolish about his question. You know what I mean? So, but you can't just like be like, no, not you. You know what I mean? So you do have to let them ask the question, okay? But just be like lately, my response is like, what does it have to do with your salvation? Right. Like, exactly. I'm trying to teach you. I'm trying to point you to Christ. Yep. You know what I mean? And you're pointing at something that has nothing to do with Christ.
So I can remember several years ago, I was in the car with 3 other pastors. And if you ever in a group of pastors, a gaggle or like, no, you went to strangle. Like, I don't know. It doesn't matter. I don't know what a group of pastors are called. It's probably not a gaggle. But anyways, I was in a car full of pastors and they were all talking about eschatology, the theology and the end of times. And so they're all of them are going around in a circle. This is what I believe. And this is what I believe. And this is what I believe. And so it gets quiet for a second. I'm like, all right, Josh, what's your take on eschatology? And my response was, I'm just trying to get people ready for when the end comes. And the car went silent, which I tend to do a lot with gaggles. But my point is exactly that. Redirect on priorities, people. Like the house is burning down. And again, soapbox, like such a soapbox for me. But like you want to talk about end of times or red moons or this, that, or the other, hypothetically, of course, because there's not a major radio TV preacher who likes to talk about red moons. There is. But we want to pack the house out with all these big, scary, controversial topics. Meanwhile, we are not living out the gospel. We are not living victoriously. We are living awful lives, ruining the name of Jesus in the meantime. But hey, when the end comes, are you going to be here or you're not? Like, just come on, let's get our priorities straight. And so my answer would be, long way around, redirect. Like, let's refocus on our priorities here. Let's get things straight. I always say this because the pastor and I have this conversation all the time. I'm not saying we can't ever talk about the end of times. If every person in your church is living the victorious, abundant Christian life and they've got it solid and they're living out Jesus and there's revival and awakening coming and everyone's on fire and living it, truly living it like Jesus came to give us, now we have some time and space to talk about eschatology. Until then, we have no business talking about what doesn't matter because we haven't figured out what does matter.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that's all I got to say about that. I probably have a lot more to say about that, but that's all I'm going to say about that.
You the gaggle whisperer.
So I think that by far, like Revelations kind of brings out the most foolishness that people ask. You know what I mean? I remember, so this was when we were in Huron, and this isn't in Revelations, but they were talking about Cain and Abel. Mm-hmm. And so Chrissy was like, do you guys know what happened between Cain and Abel? And it was almost like you were watching like an episode of like Criminal Minds or FBI or something, because they were like, I heard Cain, I heard Cain killed Abel. No, Abel killed Cain. Well, how did he kill him? He killed him with a rock. No, there were no rocks then. He used to, like, they kind of just like all went off.
It was Mrs. Plum in the banquet room with the pipe. I don't know if any of those things are correct.
Right. But like, Chrissy just kind of brought them all back into, like, it doesn't matter how it happened. The fact, the point of this, it did happen. Like that's what we want to talk about.
Not at all. Like, this is an NOYC podcast. So we are promoting NOYC here, not LifeWise. But one of the reasons I'm personally so passionate about LifeWise is one of their core values is gospel centric. Mm-hmm. To that point, like every single lesson, doesn't matter where we're teaching the Bible, every lesson comes back to a Jesus connection because of Jesus this, and it always surrounds the gospel. And I just am convinced that that's what changes lives. That has the power unto God, unto salvation.
Yes,
and that's what we need, all of us, all of humanity. I don't know,
we need to hear more like, even when we are attacked with foolishness, our response should always be point them to the gospel. You know what I mean? Like going back to this morning of the, he's like, I want to prove to them that the Big Bang Theory is incorrect. And my answer was, but what if you show them Jesus and then they learn about Jesus and then they follow with Jesus? They will eventually get to the point where like, oh, the Big Bang Theory.
The thing that I feel like so many Christians miss is that a heart is not ready to have understanding until God works within them. I think about Paul, right? Saul, Saul. Saul, like, was in front of the best teachers of his time. He heard Stephen preach. He saw the Holy Spirit use it. Like, Saul had every opportunity, but it wasn't until God smacked him off his horse, blinded him, and put him in the road.
He's the original smack me Lord.
It wasn't until God got a hold of him that Saul became Paul and could actually grasp what was being said. And so it would have done no good to have a debate with Saul, that whole time and try to convince him. His heart wasn't ready. Yeah. And I'm just convinced so many Sunday school classes, camp lessons, so many things are just falling on deaf ears. I was actually listening to another message this week by another preacher. And he was talking about the fact that Jesus said, don't cast pearls before the swine. And he's like, we don't like that today. We just think that every person is ready. Every person wants to hear it. Every person's worthy of the gospel. And he's like, that's not what Jesus believed. Jesus believed we need to be careful, almost sparing with who we present it before, because not every heart's ready.
Right. And when you have a heart that's not ready, can't even fathom what you're talking about.
I mean, if the Holy Spirit can't get Saul's attention, surely because I'm not going to have anything to say that's going to change his mind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I used to really not enjoy reading the Old Testament. So like whatever Bible study group I was in, if they went to the Old Testament, I was like,
I'm sick
yeah.
this year.
But yeah, I would read it, but it was just like, okay, like I know the gist of what's going on. But now I'm actually seeing Jesus. I'm seeing God in all these Old Testament stories. And when so Absalom in that last battle in the forest, you know what I mean? I'm pointing out, like the Bible says, the forest killed more soldiers than David's men did. Okay, and I was like, well, who put that dangerous forest there? God did. Okay, so I'm explaining like this is God's sovereign will to win this war for them, and they were like, I can see that. But if you try to explain that to a lost person, they're gonna be like, no, those were just poor soldiers who couldn't fight in the forest.
You ever heard of Johnny Appleseed?
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? And it's just like someone who's not ready for the gospel simply can't understand the gospel. Like that's the problem, and that's what leads to the foolishness, because you're speaking like two different languages.
Yep.
As host, you're not allowed to just go, yep. I just said you're not allowed to.
You just said what?
You're not allowed to just go, yep. You're the host.
Yep. Should have wrote that up there too. So are we good? Are we calmed down now?
No, absolutely not.
All right. I'll continue the conversation off camera. So make sure to like, share, subscribe. We have
a week?
2
weeks. 2 Mondays.
Okay.
Right?
We're getting really close
Yeah.
to registration closing. And we are filling up.
We're over the...
We're about half, or no.
3/4? Yeah.
It's well over halfway.
Yeah, 3/4 the way full.
Yeah.
Not full. 3/4 the way we're filling up. Just register.
Well over halfway full. I don't know exactly where we're at.
So there's like a quarter of room left.
Maybe.
I actually don't remember the number.
Yeah, I don't either.
But yeah, get your spot while you can.
Is this year filling up faster than?
I feel like they came
like
in
it
way
is,
faster this year than ever before, which is surprising to us.
Yeah.
Okay.
And nice too to be able to see.
I just had to confess that on the microphone.
I feel like there was something else. No, we're good.
Who knows?
Right, we have one more week of this series.
Yes, next week should be the last, and then we will dive into our theme for camp.
Yep, so that's exciting. So make sure to come back, and we will see you guys soon.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
One wing, we're flying away together.
Not very well, just in circles.
One week.
You know, how often I hear that.
The verse. Okay. There's your blooper. Now, if you could do a remix with Kevin doing that, I would watch that on repeat. Like.